Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're going to jump right in and completely shatter those romanticized illusions you might have about peaceful monastic life back in the 12th century. You know, when we picture the Middle Ages, it's so easy to just imagine this quiet, serene monk, illuminated by a single flickering candle, peacefully going about a life of quiet contemplation. But as we'll see in the historical realities we're breaking down today, yeah, that comforting image couldn't be further from the truth.
So let's start by unpacking the myth of monastic peace and look at the expectation versus the reality. Seriously, just picture it for a second. You imagine the soft, soothing cadence of Gregorian chants echoing through cool stone halls, right? A quiet, serene abbey where time just seems to stand absolutely still. Sounds incredibly relaxing, a true sanctuary from the chaos of the outside world. Well, you can go ahead and snap right out of it, because the absolute historical reality of the 12th century monastery was actually a highly rigid, bureaucratic, and deeply multi-phase journey. You definitely weren't just happily wandering through gardens, you were a cog in a massive, demanding machine. It was a life structured by intense rules and relentless demands that governed literally every waking second of your existence, all designed to keep the monks totally focused on spiritual obedience rather than, personal comfort.
Which brings us to the 12th century operating system, or booting up in the Dark Ages. To really wrap our heads around this bureaucratic reality, we need to look at how it actually functioned day to day. Think of it kind of like a computer's operating system, but instead of managing software and apps, it managed human suffering, strict discipline, and immense physical endurance. Let's see exactly how this grueling operating system booted up every single day. Boom. 3 a.m. Yep, that is the jarring reality. While pretty much all of us would consider 3 a.m. the absolute dead of night, for the medieval scribe, this was the brutal, mandatory wake-up call. The day officially begins in pitch blackness in the freezing cold for the very first round of daily prayers. And trust me, there was absolutely no snooze button in the 12th century. So, let's walk through this timeline together. At 3 a.m., the prayers begin. You're completely exhausted, but you're up. Then, as we move into mid-morning, you might think, hey, maybe I get a break now. Absolutely not. You're thrust directly into freezing river laundry, which, don't worry, we're going to dig into that nightmare shortly. And what about a moment for yourself? By the afternoon, your only quote-unquote me time, literally the only moment you have to rest your aching body, is a measly 7-minute nap. That's your daily operating system. It's relentless, it's exhausting, and it just runs on a loop, day after painful day. Next up, we have to talk about the claw and the intense physical brutality of the scribe. We really need to look at the specific physical toll this multi-phased journey took on the people actually doing the work. We often walk through museums and marvel at these beautiful illuminated manuscripts, but we rarely stop to think about what it cost the human body to actually create them. The visceral horror is captured perfectly in the source material. A scribe's hand curls into a claw by age 15. I mean, just really think about that for a second. We are talking about literal children and teenagers hunched over drafting tables in the freezing cold for so many hours day in and day out that their physical bodies actually deformed. Because copying these holy texts was seen as this grueling spiritual duty, there was zero emphasis on modern ergonomics or health. By the time they were just 15 years old, their writing hand was locked into a permanent claw. It's just a staggering physical sacrifice, all just to put ink to parchment.
Now, let's look at freezing rivers and scratchy wool, a true tactile nightmare.
I want to talk directly to you for a second. Think about your typical modern corporate complaints, right? Maybe the office AC is a little too high or your ergonomic chair needs a slight adjustment. Now, I want you to stack those modern inconveniences up against what these guys were dealing with physically. First off, you are wearing very scratchy wool clothing. And we aren't talking about soft modern merino wool here. This is rough, itchy, incredibly heavy material stropped directly against your skin all day long. Then you have the gritty reality of laundry day, because there are no modern washing machines here. To wash this heavy wool, you are marching down to wash it by hand in a literal freezing river. I mean, try to practically feel that bone-chilling, icy water on your hands. Hands that, remember, might already be cramping into literal claws, all while wearing an intensely itchy uniform. It is just a total tactile nightmare. Moving on to hard-on probation and the intense spiritual pressure. As if the physical suffering of freezing rivers and clawed hands wasn't enough, we really need to shift our focus to the inescapable psychological and spiritual toll, because the 12th century monastery didn't just demand your physical body, it demanded absolute, unwavering control over your mind and your soul.
Every single day, you had to undergo a rigorous daily judgment process. Your actions, your thoughts, even your microscopic failures are heavily scrutinized in this incredibly bureaucratic spiritual system. And this was specifically designed to keep the monks humble and entirely dependent on divine grace, which leads directly to living with your heart on probation every single day. You never arrive at peace. You are never fully secure in your standing. You're constantly carrying the heavy spiritual pressure of being judged and potentially found wanting, right from the moment you wake up at 3 a.m. until you finally close your eyes at night.
So let's bring it all together with the ultimate soul-sweating routine, completely redefining the daily grind. Let's synthesize everything we've talked about. We've looked at the physical deformation of the claw, the freezing environmental elements, the absolute lack of sleep, and of course, the immense psychological weight of daily judgment. The quote-unquote soul-sweating routine is this brutal 12th century combination of 3 a.m. prayers, scratchy wool, deformed claws, freezing laundry, and daily spiritual probation. This is exactly what the source material reveals, and this definition completely shatters any remaining illusions you might have had of a peaceful, quiet past. When you connect these extreme medieval elements back to our modern reality, it really makes you realize just how incredibly intense human endurance had to be to survive this daily bureaucratic system. Which brings us to a final thought for you to chew on. Next time you complain about your daily routine, ask yourself, is it a 12th century soul-sweating operating system? Look, we all have tough days, I get it. But unless your hand is curling into a permanent claw by your 15th birthday while you wash incredibly itchy wool in a freezing river after your singular 7-minute nap, well, maybe your 9 to 5 isn't so bad after all. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope exploring this gritty reality of the medieval scribe gave you a totally new perspective today. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.